You've probably heard that everything is energy, including us. And this is a truth we know from quantum physics. Most of us can't see energy, but there are some people that can, including my guest today. This is Wellness by Design. I'm your host, Jane Hogan, the Wellness Engineer, and my guest today is Pearly Montagu. Now, she had a near-death experience a number of years ago, which afterwards opened up her ability to see, feel, sense, and actually do energetic surgery on people. I had a session with her, which was absolutely profound. And she's also helped some really big people like Zach Bush, if you've heard of him, and my dear friend, Naisha Winters. Now, if you want to hear about my experience and also how she can help you, especially if you've got a surgery or something like that coming up, then stay tuned. I think you're really going to love this episode. Pearly Montagu, I'm so delighted to welcome you to Wellness by Design today. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you. It feels like such a privilege to be here. So I appreciate it.
Well, the privilege is all mine, and also for the people watching and listening, because you truly have a beautiful gift, which I got to experience myself. We had a session, and I felt so light and beautiful, and actually so motivated after that, and just feeling different in my body. So it's a beautiful gift. I absolutely love it. And I'm so grateful to Naisha Winters for introducing us. So,
Oh, I love Nisha.
she's just such a beautiful light. If people haven't already heard my podcast interview with her, just go back and have a look. It's really a great interview. And I know you've done some work for Zach Bush as well, and he's raved about the work that you do. And so let's tell people about. Well, we'll hear about the work that you do, but let's first of all talk about where you came from, because you came from the corporate world, and you're definitely not doing that now. You're more doing more energetic work. So, how did that shift happen?
It's a great question. I mean, it started in my 20s. I had a very different path, and I used to do it was a little bit like insurance broking, but I was broking some of the biggest ships in the world that used to carry 70,000 tons worth of grains across the Atlantic. And I wasn't very happy and I wasn't very healthy. And it was kind of almost like a wealth and hellness experience. And then in my 29th year, I had what was an incredibly painful experience, which was almost like a death and rebirth, where I was involved in a really serious accident. And it was a near death experience for me. And I went through this journey of having to really learn how to rebuild my physical and mental health, one foot in front of the other, and also just realizing pretty quickly how I totally honor and respect Western medicine. And it's helped me hugely in times when it was really critical, and I was in a really, had a huge need for it. But then since then, I hit a glass ceiling pretty quickly with Western medicine and just realized I had to work out my own roadmap, and no one was going to give me the landscape of how to heal. And I just realized I'd really have to learn how to be my own healer. And then I went through many different iterations, and it was times of just feeling quite disconnected to my body, quite very vulnerable. I wasn't able to work, so feeling a lot of financial vulnerability. And then going through the phase of just through various twists and turns, life ended up taking me to a little Greek island where I went because ultimately I was actually burning out, because actually my nervous system had taken such a big hit from the accident experience. And there, as life would have it, it was kind of everything I needed to heal. And it was this sort of mecca of energy workers and plant medicines, and just using all these different modalities, which were very much sitting in the esoteric space, and reflexology and craniosacral therapy and acupuncture, and using psilocybin mushrooms as a medicine in a ceremonial way, and a naturopath, and just all these different things that I just didn't know about and I hadn't been educated on. And so I then went through such a thirst for learning, just tried to, once I had experienced all of these things that had been so meaningful to me and really helped my thyroid come back into balance, and just all the different injuries that I'd had in my body. And after that, I then was really inspired to learn and train in some of the modalities that had helped me in such a meaningful way. And so that's been the journey of training reflexology, and then craniosacral therapy, and then Kundalini activation. And then I guess I have such a natural curiosity for people's bodies and what I find when I start working with people. And so it sort of became one layer after another of
Mm.
incorporating that. And then I started to use my voice by singing mantras. And I remember I was in this kind of negative loop I just couldn't get myself out of. And I wasn't in such a great place. And I was cycling a lot in London, in the UK. And I realized I used to sing mantras when I was cycling on my bike, and I would cycle maybe 20 hours a week. And it was like I'd shifted. It was like suddenly I'd shifted and changed. And it was kind of like all this light and abundance started to come into my life, and like opportunities. And it was like the first time I really understood why mantras are called medicine music and how they can really change your state. And then I've always grown up, my mom always taught me to believe that we always have a guardian angel. Everyone has a guardian angel to look after them. And for me, my experience has been that my brothers and I have all had close calls, and it was always like there was someone there and just looking after us. And so I started to call in angels. And then, whilst I tried to educate myself and learn, or listening to other people, podcasts of people who also kind of work with angels, that, you know, learning certain prayers. And then as I learned new things and incorporated, the sessions started to change, and people would start to say they saw white light moving through their body, but I didn't tell them that that's what I was calling in, or working with Archangel Gabriel, who's the angel of white light. And then it just sort of continued to build. And then I just had this very defining moment with my business partner a couple of years ago, where he couldn't lift up his arm. And it was the first time I saw colors in the body. And he had this sort of gray smoke around his shoulder socket. And it's sort of a little bit like, kind of the essence of what I do is really a microenergetic surgery, because I'm just cutting and removing what's blocking the biology of the body so that it can return to its original design. And I always say, you know, I'm working with the electromagnetic field of the body, rather like acupuncture or Reiki and the like. And so it's not me healing someone's body. It's like the body then comes forward to heal. And ultimately, I'm just a vessel, and it does just whatever comes through me when I make myself available to someone. And that's how you can always be lucky enough to really meet people wherever they are. Of like, I never know whether the sessions are going to go left or right. Rather, like, you know, when I was lucky enough to work with you, and it's always so fascinating with me of just the number of different things that can come up, or the visions, or the clarity, or the downloads, or the structures, or the colors. But after working with my business partner, just like cutting and removing all this sort of, you know, like a gray smoke, and then by the end of the session, he just could lift up his arm and put it in his coat, and he was totally fine. So it's a little bit like a muscle. The more I do, the more I can do. And then sort of building my confidence of realizing I can't only do it in person, I can also do it online. And then um and then also, and Zach was very kind in doing a testimonial for me, but also people like Zach or Nisha who really don't have time to sit on a Zoom for 2 hours, and we're often in different time zones. And so those sort of types will message me and just say, I've had a headache for 4 days, or like I have a massive pain in my foot, or I've got a meeting and I'm really like, there's so much anxiety. Can you please help with someone that's really problematic within my organization? And I can just see whether it's energetic bonds between two people, of like working around the energetic landscape around relationships, or, you know, people who might have had a headache for 4 days, and then they can actually just leave me a 1 minute video, and then I'm able to tune into their energetic landscape. And so I find it incredibly humbling, and I just feel like the luckiest person in the world to be able to help people
Mm.
with the gift that I was given.
Oh my goodness. Amazing, amazing story. And there's a lot I want to unpack in there. Um, I near-death experiences really fascinate me, and there's like thousands and thousands of cases, documented cases. So it's a real thing. It is a real thing.
Absolutely.
And so many people seem to, when they have this near-death experience and they have a little experience of being, across the veil or on the other side or that other version of themselves, their soulful self, it tends to awaken gifts like this. It tends to awaken the ability to see or feel energy.
Yeah.
Was that I mean, it sounds like that was the case for you. Was it something immediate or did it kind of happen over time? And how did that unfold for you?
Well, if we go back one step, actually, I was invited by TED to be a speaker recently in LA, and I spoke about death and rebirth and my near-death experience. And through trying to go back to science, because they're not so big on the esoteric space, was to look at research that's been done.
Yeah.
And it's really interesting that over 10 million Americans alone have reported near death
Oh, I
experiences.
didn't know it was that
And
high. Wow.
yeah, yeah, it's really fascinating. And also, the pattern has been in, there's a brilliant professor in the Virginia University who just basically identified that through that came these heightened sense of awarenesses and just
Mhm.
things that they couldn't really explain. And anytime I meet someone who's also psychic and just has a can sort of play seventh dimensional chess, it's always like they've had. I remember this one psychic. She put her fingers when she was little in the plugs, and so she had an electric shock and was like. And so I think when you come close to the veil, it's like there's a portal. It's like there's something that opens, and it's just. I guess it's probably something you could close down if it's really bothersome, but um yeah, it's and for me it wasn't immediate. It took many years for it to come through, but a little bit like I had to go through my own death and rebirth. And if you look at astrology, the 29th year is also known as your Saturn return. And what that means is Saturn is where it was when you were born. And
Oh.
it's typically it's called a Saturn return. And it's typically times in your life that's associated with a lot of transition, but it can be quite painful and quite difficult. And for me, I had this fascinating year where it was 100% the hardest year I've ever had. But at the beginning of the year, I had a relationship end that was a codependent relationship. It was just shattering, like it was deeply dishonoring the way that he ended the relationship. And but for me, it was such an amazing lesson of like I allowed myself to be in a financially codependent relationship and all the vulnerability that went with that. But because I was so kind of broken that I really just meditated through the pain for the next 6 months so much. And so it was like I always say when I'm working with clients, it's like is is your mind like a runway? Our minds are like a runway. So is your mind like Heathrow, which is one of the biggest airports in the world, in the UK, where the biggest plane can land every 90 seconds and it doesn't shake? Or is your mind something like an African bush runway where the biggest plane can land and it would just be a shit show? And so
Hmm.
then six months later, just as I was getting back on my feet, I then was involved in this like really just awful accident. And it was like life had given me 6 months of training just to be really stable and really still and really calm. And I just remember it so clearly. And I was so calm. And I was just so clear of like, this is going to be okay. Like, I'm not going to be a victim. This is not going to be my narrative. This is not going to be my identity. And I had just, yeah, I just really had done the work so that it didn't make me shake. But I just physiologically had a lot of injuries, which actually took me years to understand. But that was the journey. And I also wouldn't change anything for all the pain, for all the everything that I went through. it's been such a gift, and I have so much gratitude for the whole experience, because it's
Mhm.
brought me to a place where I am able to help people, and it just brings me so much joy, and I find it so deeply nourishing at a soul level.
I get that because also, my own journey with pain, I wouldn't be here right now. If you didn't have
Of
your journey,
course.
you and I wouldn't be here right now having this conversation. And so
Okay.
I find it so helpful to accept that everything's happening for us, for our
Yeah.
growth, for our awakening, and for us to hopefully, also shift things in the world a little bit because we're talking about this, we're sharing it with people,
Yeah.
and maybe they can see themselves in this. Because when we have sort of regrets, or we're disappointed about what's happened to us in our life, that just keeps us in that lower vibration,
Yeah.
and just kind of changes everything. But I want to come back to, you mentioned the mantras that
Yes.
you were cycling 20 hours a week and reciting these mantras. And
Hmm.
I've done yoga for years and known about mantras for years, but they actually, the words, and I don't know if you had like a particular one that was given to you, but there's something about them that they have an energy about them.
Yeah.
Even the words, if it's, it could be English words, it could be Sanskrit, it could be anything, but the vibration of the words changes things in our energetic field. And of course,
Of
people
course.
that are watching and listening, you might hear us talking about energy and it might sound kind of woo woo, but I want to come back to the quantum physics. It tells us that everything is energy. So we are energy. We're 99.99999% energy. And
Yeah.
so what's going on energetically, which is just a vibration, it affects and it comes down and it has an impact in this physical body that we're in, and
Yeah.
more, right? In our life, in all kinds of our relationships, our finances, everything. So can you talk a little bit about that? About, was it something, was it the same mantra you spoke all the time? And do you think it was a vibrational thing, or was it like a reprogramming the brain thing, or a little bit of both?
The mantra that I used was the Hare Krishna mantra, which I can share so it can go in the show notes. But I was listening to it this morning actually, but it's yeah, it just, I guess my experience, my meditation teacher explained illnesses to me in such a fascinating way, sort of energetically. He said, look, illnesses have their own vibration,
Hmm.
and we have our own vibration. And so it's about getting yourself higher than the illness you are. So, for example, and that's how, when meditation comes in, or mantras, or things that change your state and change your frequency. So, for example, the common cold is not a sophisticated disease. But on retreats in the winter in the UK, there would be about 15% of the group that would have a cold. And we'd be meditating for about 8 hours a day whilst doing a Vipassana, which is an 8-day, very held retreat. And then by about day 2, day 3, everyone's cold has gone, because we've got our frequency, and the collective energy is obviously so much more like your energy plus my energy is more like 10. It's not 1 plus 1 equals 2.
Right.
And so obviously, when you look at more sophisticated diseases like HIV, then that's like it's a different game. That's the other end of the scale. But with mantras, in terms of like the heart resonance, and and so fundamentally, any mantra will be able to change your state, and you just become, it's almost like a conductor for just creating and changing the field that's around you. I don't know if that helps, but I remember actually having a really interesting conversation with Zach, because when so much was coming through, and I don't always understand what I see and what I'm guided to do, but I can always ask for help from my guides. But he was saying, and obviously he weaves on both sides of the field in terms of Western medicine and then more in the esoteric space. But he helped me to sort of understand, in terms of, like, of course, how the reason that energy medicine, energy work can be so impactful, which is rather like what you touched on before, which is we're mainly made up of space and matter and energy. So rather than Western medicine, which will work from the skin, you're starting, if you work in a desk, you're starting from the 99.999. So it's like way more likely of how it can really help people, which is why I think I have like what I often say is like my results are pretty immediate. It's like either I can't help at all or it's like immediate. And it's like if someone comes and says I've got a broken leg, it's like that's not my sweet spot. But everything else around that, unless it's like a massive structural thing, like a big broken bone, there's energetic stuff around that that you can also help. And I also often say with clients who are going through operations, which is when someone cuts you, like our 3D body, with a piece of metal, like you're actually cutting through the different energetic layers in the body, and it's a really actually quite a big thing to do. So I always really love working with clients like beforehand, just to coach them mentally to get them into a good place for the operation, of like seeing it in a positive way, because it's been so proven again and again of how if you go into an operation like thinking that it will change your life, it's going to be better, it's going to be great, rather like, you know, when you get a colostomy bag, but seeing that as like it will give you new freedom, lease of life, versus like, oh my God, the shame, the embarrassment. And that's just been proven that the results are better. So I was working with a client recently who's going through scoliosis, and she was really scared about the operation because it was pretty huge in her on her spine. But yeah, just it was fascinating for me because I'm learning all the time. But she actually asked me to work on her body whilst the surgeons were working on her.
Oh,
And actually I was able to just watch them like from above and just watch the operation going on, and then working with her different vertebrae in her spine. And it's everything is always new because it's just unique to that person's journey. But for me, it was fascinating.
mm. It's so true. You know, your expectations of anything and your beliefs about anything impact your experience of those things always.
Of
I talk about that
course.
with people. You know, some people, most people who come to me have chronic pain or other chronic conditions, and sometimes they're on
Hmm.
medications and they're like, I just want to get off this. Like, okay, let's just see it for now as a support that for you that you know, so many people in the world would be so grateful to have the opportunity to have this, and so let's see it as a support and something that's helping you. I mean, that I do believe that that's going to change the experience of it.
Absolutely.
Uh, can we talk a little bit about the, you know, this energetic surgery, and maybe in the
Hmm.
context of the session that you and I had together, which
Please.
was profound, profound for
Mm.
me, because you really found something I felt that perhaps I was even ignoring a little bit. So I've talked a lot about how this year has been a stressful year for me. You know, written my
Hmm.
book and got the book out, and you know, doing some new programs, and I didn't have an assistant until just recently, and so it has been a stressful year, and I've noticed that my, you know, heart rate variability has really tanked, not sleeping well, and a bunch of these things. And I just thought, you know, it's because I'm busy. But I think there's also something that you found, and I think this might have been something my whole life, that I kind of protect myself um, sometimes, and sort of not open, because you talked about this, that I was like in a shark tank. And
Cage.
yeah, a cage, because I was protecting myself from the sharks out there, and I think that is something I've kind of carried my whole life. Do you want to dive into that a little bit?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, with um, what I find often when we're working with someone, it's like let's just go back to if I understand the landscape around when they were little and when
Mhm,
there were huge experiences that really impacted them, and around the age of 6 or 7 is a classic time that like something that's really big that really sets
mhm,
the tone, sets the pace of how we're conditioned. And so if you work, you know, for example, in your case, if you work rather like not working with the symptom, but we work with the cause. So it's like the pain that we feel now is from the wound that we had when we were really little. So if you
Hmm.
do the work where you connect to that inner child and you start to build a relationship with that inner child, then there's so much healing that can come fundamentally when we feel witnessed and seen. And I always hold people in a place of unconditional love just so that they feel safe. And so I'll guide them somatically on a journey of visualizing, connecting with that child and speaking to that child and asking that child, what does it want or what does it need? And maybe it wants a hug or just to be taken away from that situation. And so if you just spend that time with that person, because what can happen is we can build armor and just things that protect us of how we show up in the world. And it's totally understandable. But then it comes to a place when it's fundamentally not serving us. And we sort of need to go through a de-armoring and being removed from that cage that that has just served its purpose, and it's just time to set you free into like a new lease of life. Because often sometimes and what I found really fascinating with you is like I saw so much light in your fields, but also just and I hope you don't mind if like we can go
Go
there, but it was
ahead.
just like it was just to really encourage you and give you permission to really just hold you in that space of like really encouraging to step into your light. And a lot of the times when it's like a dimmer switch or a lampshade, it's like the light is being dim, but you have so much to offer. And that beautiful like vision I saw of you with that symbol, rather like in the Olympics when they have that beacon that they're holding of the torch, and it's like the work that you do to the people who are in pain. It's like it's such a light and a torch bearer that you bear, and it's like just shine as brightly as you can so that it can help light up more people and more people can heal. And so that's why I find so much I'm very connected to light, and I work a lot with light and also with water, different elements. Like when in the session with you, is water as an element represents cleansing and clearing and washing away. And so to put you in back into that water, and also water for me, it's so fascinating because water will ultimately come to stillness when it isn't disturbed. And we are fundamentally made up of water. And then you can look at structuring water and how the body always remembers, and how water holds memory and water remembers. So it's just so fascinating when you start to weave through the layers of when I start to open the space and start to channel and just make myself available, and just seeing all these visions of like you at the bottom of this mountain with this like massive road in front of you. But it's just just going higher and higher so that you can help more and more people. Is just that was the vision that I saw. It was
Mm.
fascinating for me.
Thank you so much for that. And I really relate to that armor. And in fact, in my webinar, I even have like a slide with armors. Like we build up this armor to protect us. And
Yeah,
ultimately, like you said, it served its purpose at some point, but along the way, it's really stopping us from fully shining and expressing that full version of ourselves. So, and I think what you sort of energetically snipped it away, cut it away, and freed me from this, so
yeah,
I can be more open and ready to just shine my light, shine my light.
yeah. Because
Um,
it's funny. It's funny, like the word that you very kindly used was profound, and that's the word actually that I get most. And then the other thing, the feedback that I get the most is I feel lighter.
yeah,
And friends will say like just look a little bit brighter. And energy work is very supple and very deep. Just I don't know for anyone, any of your listeners who've done medicine work in terms of plant medicine, psilocybin or ayahuasca, but it's it's deep but very subtle. And so you won't necessarily see massive shifts, but it's just like you're just working through the layers, rather like with therapy, like or reflexology. The body will always show you something that you can work with, and then just keep removing what I see blocking the energetic body
mm.
so that it can return to its original design.
And I found during our session too, Pearly. you were doing your thing and I was quietly with my eyes closed, being still, but I could see water. I could see the road. I could
Yeah,
see the light. All of
yeah,
these things were I was getting as well. It was just beautiful. I think when I got on with you today, I said how light I felt. So light,
yeah,
light, but also light, bright,
yeah,
it was absolutely wonderful. So,
yeah.
what could someone expect from a session with you then? I mean, I think we got a bit of an idea, but just to kind of like, they're like, wow, I think I've got it. Maybe they're saying I've got a surgery coming up. How would that work? Or I've still got this pain and I've tried a bunch of things and I'd like to work on energetics. What would people expect if they did a session with you?
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, with anything from sort of anxiety to back pain, or if they have an operation coming up, it's like so much. So fundamentally, the heart of what I'm really tend to work around is trauma. So
Hmm.
it's like emotional, physical trauma that's held in the body, and I just have this unique gift that comes through where I can see where it is in the body, and then I've learned over time how to cut it and remove it. But it's also so much of also about the power of positive mindset, and it's like whatever we think about expands, and your mind is like a garden and anything you focus on will grow. So it's also about helping them to reframe, like if it's coming into an operation, like I've worked a lot with clients just to support them mentally, just to get them in the right mindset. But that can really be applied to everything, not just going into an operation. But
Hmm.
if it's anxiety, like anxiety is actually very easy for me. Like I'm normally able to wrap that in one session. And then there's a whole load of resource tools. So maybe because I've spent the last sort of 10 years really trying to educate myself and just such a thirst for learning. So rather like what I did with you, there's like a whole list of resource tools at the end, because as much as I love doing what I do, it's also really important to me that I enable people so they're not dependent on me, and so that they also get a whole load of like prayers and very effective tools that they can use to help with anxiety, that they can use anytime, that doesn't cost any money. So it's like a ton of resource tools. Like everything is recorded and just summary notes, like morning prayers, evening prayers, just any sort of practices or rituals or anything that might help them. And then I also hold a container of like, there are some clients that I look after more on a monthly basis. And I just, I'm a touch base that they can always ask for advice or support over different like business challenges. Cause fundamentally, like I'm just a connection to source, and I'm just a vessel, and it just comes out of my mouth through me, but it's not from me. So yeah, depending on wherever people are with their landscape, like worries around work or family, or like if people have challenges around their family, I'm able to see the bonds between those family members, and like sometimes cut the bonds if you've got people in your field that it's not serving you, or like it might sound a little out there, but it's very normal in my world. It's like we can often pick up entities or beings that can stay in our fields, and I can see them, and I'm very good at removing them. So it's all like protection prayers. And so yeah, anything from like emotion, any sort of emotional physical pain that fundamentally sits around trauma and back pain, just like everyone has such, I'm not quite sure why human beings are quite so complicated, but everyone's pretty unique. But it's, I think, because fundamentally, like I just make myself available to that person, and so I'm able to meet them wherever they are, mentally or physically. And I always open the space by saying, how can I help? Where are you emotionally, physically, mentally, spiritually, financially, sexually? Like, what feels important to you? And then we just keep going through the layers of like, is there anything else important that's happened to you? You know, I'd love to understand. And as we just keep going through, and then once I have a full landscape, it's just always the case whenever anyone starts to talk to me, then I just start to see colors and structures and where it is that's being held in their body or in their field. And then I always ask them, like, what would you like me to prioritize? And then I say, I'll open the space by saying some prayers for a couple of minutes. And then we'll play some music. And it's just really to allow the medicine of the music to carry you. And then I'll start to channel. And then I start to do the microenergetic surgery of just removing whatever I see blocking the field. And then the last 20 minutes, we have a sharing. So I share all the colors, the structures, downloads, visions, anything that comes through. And then I always invite them to share. And often, very often, it's mirrored. So what I've seen, they see, and it's, yeah. And then close with all the resource tools and the next step, just so they feel very held.
Mm. Well, I mean, I can say my experience was absolutely wonderful, and the sharing at the end was really magical to hear those things. So,
Important.
I'm just so grateful that you've come into my life and that I can share you with my audience. And
Thank you.
yeah, just really excited about that. And I'd love to put a link to your TED Talk as well. I'll get that and put that in the notes. And also, did you want to talk about the gift that you want to give the audience?
Yeah, absolutely. So there's for your community, I would love to offer a special limited offer, which is $250 off a session with me. And so normally it's $650, but I'm delighted to offer it for only $400. And so yeah, people can connect with me, and you can find me on it's on Instagram. It's under Pearly Montagu, or a pearly way of life. And pearl is just like an
Mhm.
oyster in the sea. Um, and then you can see on the link tree, you can see all the different offerings and protection prayers and readings, like purpose readings and things like that I do. So you can always connect and find me. And there's lots of free resource tools on there as well. And then also my website, which is mandalay.org. So it's manderley.org. And so, yeah, just a little touch of all the different flavors of the different offerings that I have.
And we'll have the links in the description or the show notes so that people can find them. You know, if you're driving or you're trying to scramble to write down that, don't worry about it. It's just check down below. Those links will be there. Um, I'd love to ask you the one thing, I always do this. What's one thing, a simple shift someone could do today that's going to switch their body into healing mode? What would you say one thing would be a baby step?
So we can do the tapping exercise, which we'll send in the show notes, which you and I did together at the end, which is 3 minutes also on my Instagram. But
Hmm.
something I can explain now, which is just gratitude. And I always say it's our thoughts that create our reality and the filter of how we see the world. And it's like the wise man controls his thoughts. And it's like, I always say in a fun way, if you and I were to go out driving and I'd say we're only going to look for blue cars, like we would only start to see blue cars. And it's like, if you just change, like, honestly, to me, it's the Willy Wonka golden ticket. It's like, if you just operate from a place of gratitude, like it's an incredibly high frequency to operate from. And
Hmm.
if you just ground the essence of your life, which is just really how I live, and I just know it's just why I've been quite lucky to have walk quite an extraordinary path. It's just because I'm so grateful for everything. And just before bed, it's like when we're half asleep or we're half awake is the easiest time to reprogram your mind. And so when I wake up, it's like all the things that I'm grateful for, which I'm calling in from the present tense. And then just before bed, without fail, I always write down all the things I'm grateful for that are good that have happened that day. And you write it rather than say it, because then your body, you're able to, we're visual beings fundamentally, and you can then see this list of 10 things, and it's a Monday and nothing really has happened. And so it's just like this constant building new neural pathways that just fundamentally do shift, rather like in any relationship or in your life or your health. It's the little things that we do every day that really move the dial and can just really help and enable you in such a meaningful way.
Beautiful. Yeah, I've got a gratitude habit before going to bed of thinking about the things, but you after our session you talked about writing them down, and so I've shifted
Yeah.
now to
Yeah.
writing down the things, and it does change things. It's really
Yeah.
cementing. It takes a little bit longer too. So you're really in that gratitude space for a little bit longer. And I totally agree with you, Pearlie, that it's the little things that we do consistently that really
Always.
shift the needle in our lives. So
Yeah. Yeah.
I am so grateful for you for being here today on Wellness by Design, and I'm just so grateful that I've now connected with you, that got to have this
Nisha.
experience with you, and I get to share you with other people as well. So thank you so much for your light, all these years of work that you've put into learning this process and continuing to learn and just sharing that, being so generous and sharing all that with people. So thank you so much, Pearlie.
Oh, such a privilege and so much gratitude back to you. So thank you for your journey and for everything that you've done to be here.
So we'll have all the links there for people if you want to connect with Pearlie and maybe go a little bit further. But I hope that you got something out of this and you know that you're empowered. And that's a big message from me. It's a big message from Pearlie that you are the empowered one. What you think and how you feel makes a difference. It impacts your life. You can change your life with your thoughts and your feelings. So, all right, we'll see you again soon. Next episode of Wellness by Design.